it's my pleasure to introduce our two presenters today, both of whom I've had the pleasure of working with now for a number of years. So Manoela Pessoa de Miranda is a program manager at the Secretariat of the Minamata Convention. She's a biologist by training with over 18 years of experience with the UN, and she's been working on biodiversity, conservation, sustainable agriculture, and sound management of chemicals. Our second speaker, and I think they'll combine their presentation, is Eisaku Toda. He's responsible for the scientific and technical matters at the Secretariat of the Minamata Convention Secretariat. Before joining UNEP, he worked on environmental policy making and chemicals management for the Japanese Environment Ministry and for the OECD. So with it, over to you, Manoela. I think you're going to start the presentation.
Thanks, Simon, for the introduction, for the invitation. It's a pleasure, but an honor as well to be here today. As you said, AMAP and UNEP, but also the Minamata Convention Secretariat have a long history of collaboration, and it's great to be here. And I know that our collaboration will only get stronger as we move forward. So Eisaku and I will share the presentation today, and it's not just for practicality, it's because we actually share the work as well. And I will be talking about the effectiveness evaluation of the Minamata Convention. This has become almost of a noun, effectiveness evaluation. It's in the mouth of every government. It's been a long process, but what it really entails is evaluating how effective the convention is. And it's primarily aimed at looking at the global level. Before we delve into the effectiveness evaluation itself, let me just say a couple of words about the convention. The convention has 147 parties across the entire globe. It's the numbers are still increasing. We hope it will become a universally adopted convention sometime in the future, but it's already quite significant. The convention is the only international agreement, or a multilateral environmental agreement, as we call it, that addresses mercury. And what's interesting also is that it addresses the whole life cycle of mercury, from its sources to waste. It also contains a number of supporting provisions, such as Article 22, that speaks about the effectiveness evaluation. And specifically, it calls on the Conference of the Parties, the COP, as we call it, which is our governing body, to begin the evaluation no later than 6 years from the entry into force of the convention. For reference, it entered into force in 2017, so the 6-year mark was last year. It has not been such a straightforward process so far. The COP, so our Conference of the Parties, have been discussing how to conduct the effectiveness evaluation since its first meeting in 2017, and has taken decisions every single meeting since then. And there was the time pressure that the effectiveness evaluation had to start in 2023, and that indeed happened. It was at the fourth meeting, COP4, where the parties came together and adopted the effectiveness evaluation framework, so the overall structure of this process, and also the science body. It's an open-ended scientific group. Eisaku will speak more about this, but it's basically a large science group that's in charge of providing the primarily monitoring, but also data on emissions and releases of mercury across the globe. I think Eisaku will talk about the membership and so on, so I will leave it to him to say more about the OESG, as we call it. But there were still some details about the effectiveness evaluation that could not be agreed in 2022 at COP4, and that was only agreed at the end of last year. And now we have the full framework, all the pieces moving together, and that includes the indicators for the effectiveness evaluation, the effectiveness evaluation group, which is a policy body that we work closely with the open-ended scientific group, and also the COP decided that the end of the first effectiveness evaluation will be in 2027 at COP at its 7th meeting. There was quite some discussion. Some countries wanted it sooner, other countries wanted it even later, and eventually there was an agreement to end in 2027. And in the beginning of when there's no set date to when it will start looking at information, but it's there's an agreement more or less of trying to look at data starting from the entry into force of the convention, but it's not a fixed date. We only have a fixed date for the end. The effectiveness evaluation process will be guided by 4 policy questions. These are very broad, and it's up then to these 2 bodies working together. So the science body that we call the OESG, the Open-Ended Scientific Group, and the effectiveness evaluation group to work together to see how to answer these very high-level questions. The first question is, have the parties taken actions to implement the Minamata Convention? It's fairly straightforward. This is information coming straight from the parties. The second one starts increasing in level of complexities, whether these actions have resulted in changes in mercury supply, use, emissions, and releases into the environment, so already having an impact. The third one is whether the changes are resulting changes in levels of mercury in the environment, biotic media, and vulnerable populations that can be attributed to the Minamata Convention. It's on this third question that the science community is most interested. And the last question is, to what extent the existing measures under the Minamata Convention are meeting, there's a verb meeting, missing there, sorry, under the Minamata Convention are meeting the objective of protecting human health and the environment from mercury. Just to recall, the objective of the Minamata Convention is to protect both human health as well as the environment from anthropogenic sources of mercury. You all know mercury is a naturally occurring substance, and the Minamata Convention focuses only on man-made sources. This is the framework. It has several pieces, as I mentioned before, several documents. I will come into more detail about this later. Basically, the first half of what you see on the screen is already done. The first black box here that you see more or less in the middle of the screen was the COP that we had in November of last year, COP 5. And now we are on the second half of the screen. Obviously, this is not to scale. This is much more than these simple 3 steps, and it will take actually 4 years, this half of on the right side of the screen. This is just to show you what's the framework that was adopted, but also to show that there are different players. So focusing now on what's to come, we have, again, the OESG, the science body, and the EEG, the policy, working together, but we also have information being provided through the Secretariat, and these are basically information that countries give to us, we synthesize, and that we present. There is also a trade report that the Secretariat has prepared with the help of some consultants, which is based on information provided by countries, but also information that's in the grey literature. These will all be analyzed by the effectiveness evaluation group against the indicators, and hopefully have by COP7 in 2027, the effectiveness evaluation report, and also very important lessons learned and recommendations. One thing that's already obvious is that there are many gaps in information, and we hope that this first cycle of evaluation will also lead to a number of gaps being identified, so that we can have then policy responses to address those gaps. Let me say a few words about this, the policy body, the effectiveness evaluation group. it was tasked with overseeing the effectiveness evaluation process and preparing the final effectiveness evaluation report. There are 25 participants from parties. This was quite a contentious issue to come to this number, and it's the only reason why this group was not established together with the science body is because the parties could agree on the number of participants. There was a huge range. Some wanted 3, primarily because of budgetary constraints, and some parties wanted up to 8. So there was this big variation, but eventually in November of last year, the parties came together and agreed that there will be 5 members from each of the 5 UN regions. If you're not familiar, these regions are Latin America and the Caribbean, Africa, Asian Pacific, Eastern European states, and what we call WEOG, it's Western Europe and others group. These are basically most of the developed countries, except for Japan, that decided to be in the Asia and Pacific region. So, and we will have 5 members of the effectiveness evaluation group per region, plus observers. The number of observers is a bit unclear. There is in the TOR of this group, it says up to 5 observers, which is quite little, in my opinion, drawn from a number of different groups, including civil society, academia, industry, and monitoring networks, for example. But it also opens up the door to bring additional observers to contribute to the process. I hope Eisaku will mention observers also in the OESG, even though we don't call them observers necessarily, but there is a number of experts that are supporting, such as AMAP, for example, a number of experts that are supporting the scientific part of this process. So it's very important to have members of the scientific community as well as other stakeholders in these processes, not only to enrich, but also to bring different perspectives and to ensure that the outcomes are also translated to other sectors. The effectiveness evaluation group will work online with a maximum of 2 face-to-face meetings. And this is 2 face-to-face meetings until 2027. We do not foresee a meeting in person of this group before the next COP, that's in 2025. So next year, so from now until the end of next year, this group will work online to start advancing its work. A couple of words on the indicators, the data sources. The indicators were agreed also in November of last year. There are 36 indicators. Here, it's important to note that there are 2 indicators related to monitoring. One is general monitoring in general of all environmental compartments as well as humans, and there's one specific for humans. It's almost as a blanket indicator, these 2, because it's expected the science body, the OESG, will further develop those indicators. It could not do so up to now, because it first needs to look at what data is available and to do some of the analysis. But it's expected that this number of 36 indicators may increase, or maybe there will be sub-indicators. In terms of sources of information, it's a wide range. What's important to note is that the terms of reference for the effectiveness evaluation group says that the main sources of information are reports and data submitted by parties, but it does not exclude data submitted from other sources. And especially coming from the science stream, we foresee that there will be also much data coming from sources that are not governments. To give you some examples of the data that will feed into the final evaluation, there will be national reports and synthesis reports prepared by the Secretariat. There will be the scientific reports prepared by the OESG, a trade report that's already prepared by the Secretariat and is available. And there will be other types of documents, such as project documents from the Global Environment Facility, that's our main funding mechanism, as well as the specific international program. It's a program that we have capacity building and technology transfer projects, but also COP documents and in other sources. There is a long list that's even not exhaustive of available documents that's shown on the screen in a document. The trade report that I mentioned is also available online. I think all the documents that we are mentioning are available online. And this pass to Eisaku if you're ready to take over and talk about the open-ended scientific group. Eisaku, please.
Thank you, Monia. So I believe that Manoela is fully capable of presenting this PPT because I took over the work on the OESG after COP5. She was handling this before COP5 last year, but since the COP5 agreed on the establishment of EEG, we decided that Manoela will take care of that part, that policy part, and I took over the scientific part. So the OESG was established by COP4 decision, and the task here is a copy and paste from the COP decision for 11, and it is this is outcome. The wording here is a result of the heavy negotiation of what the scientific community will contribute to the effectiveness evaluation. I think most of you are familiar with other sister convention, the Stockholm Convention on POPs, and the Stockholm Convention has quite similar article as we do, but the arrangement is a bit different. And the Stockholm, they have the effectiveness evaluation committee and for monitoring global coordination group and regional bodies and so on. But for the Minamata Convention, the parties agreed on a much simpler approach. So the EEG for to do the effectiveness evaluation report to be submitted COP, and OESG to support that process from a scientific point of view. Also, the word monitoring is quite key because the Article 22 says that the COP will establish an arrangement to be able to use the monitoring data on the existence of levels of mercury in the environment and so on. So the first task is to compile and analyze and synthesize the monitoring data, and then evaluate the impact of mercury, and then they draw conclusions for the effectiveness evaluation group. So the OESG consists of 43 members nominated by parties, and it is the membership is 1 member per party, but parties can nominate multiple experts to a roster who supports the work. Also, the observer or other organizations. Observer to the COP includes non-parties and also the NGOs, IGOs, and so on. The OESG is co-chaired by Dominic Barry of Cote d'Ivoire and Terry Keating of USA. And there are 6 teams: air monitoring, Sandy, Stephen, Biota, Karina from Argentina, and human, Miranda Hovat, and other media, Adrian from Switzerland, and emission releases, Ronnie from Sierra Leone and Lin Bill from South Africa, and integrated analysis, Noriki Suzuki. I think, and the group met in Geneva last year. And thank you to Simon for coming to this meeting, and also you may notice that Eva Prumel is also here. She's also heavily involved in EMA. And I think you may note some familiar names in the leadership of the open working scientific group. So the OESG, he worked for 2 years and submitted this progress report that includes a plan for monitoring data compilation and plan for emission releases data summary, and also the update report. And I think this presentation will be shared, and the link will take you to the actual document. And also develop the draft plan for data analysis. So the OESG is to work on 3 plans and 3 reports, and then synthesize them into a scientific report. Each for the monitoring data, air, biota, humans, and so on, and then emission releases, and then analysis of the data. Now the OESG is embarking on the actual development of the monitoring data report, and then and also emissions and releases data report. So we called for expression of intent to provide data, and submissions submitted expression of intent is already has been posted on the website, and also, again, thank you to AMAP for expressing interest in providing data on various a number of media. So and the group will meet online tomorrow. Actually, I think this is a 10th online meeting, and to further work to develop the monitoring data summary, emissions and release data summary, data analysis report, and gaps and lessons learned report. My last slide is a rough schedule of the work. Please note that this is just a draft schedule developed by the OESG co-chairs. There's no official schedule of work, because we are still to establish the effectiveness evaluation group on which will really consider the specific steps. What has the only thing that have been agreed by COP is that COP7 in 2027 will complete the process. So the OESG is constantly planning the work on these the 4 reports, which you see in the middle, with a rough timeline. And initial summary, the target for submitting data is set for the end of March. So we are going to contact those who expressed intent of submission, express intent to submit data by this date as much as possible. And then this second in-person meeting is envisaged for the first quarter of 2025, but we have to further plan. And it is not. I didn't put this in the slide, but one practical thing is that we signed a partnership agreement with the Biodiversity Research Institute, the BRI, to support the data management. So they will provide platform for data submission and work on the format of database format that on which OESG can work to analyze the data. So I think this is my last slide, and back to Manoela.
Thanks, Eisaku. Just a couple of words on the schedule of work of the effectiveness evaluation group. You see on the screen that it has March. This at the bottom of the last row of this scheme. It shows the EEG starting its work in March and working through 2025, and then wrapping up its work in 2006, and then beginning of 2027. We hope to use this, what you see in this salmon color, so that's this year and next year, for the EEG to advance its work. The data from the science part will not be available yet, but if you recall the other sources of data, and among those 36 indicators, there is much work that can take place already now with the information that we have available. So we'll start sending out a call for nominations soon for countries, and then it will be up to the regions to select the members of that group. So all in all, we hope that by June of this year, we will have some initial work all done online for now of the effectiveness evaluation group. So with this, that ends the effectiveness evaluation process itself. But because you're scientists, I thought we would share a couple of information, a couple of recent publications that we've prepared. One is, and these are part of this scientific and technical series of the Minamata Secretariat. The first publication is on the socio-economic impacts of mercury pollution on fisheries and livelihoods. It's relevant, of course, to the Arctic, but it's also relevant to many of the tropical areas because millions and millions of people depend on fish for their consumption, but also for their livelihoods. And it touches upon also the use of natural capital assessment as a possible tool for governments to assess the impact of mercury pollution, the economic impact or socioeconomic impact of mercury pollution. It also makes a link with ecosystem services and functions. The other publication, this is more recent. It's based on a COP5 document, but it was reformatted, and it's available in 3 different languages. Is Mercury and Biodiversity, and it makes linkages to recently adopted Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. It's a large framework with that is based on the whole of government and whole of society approaches to reverse the loss of biodiversity at the global level. We mapped the linkages between mercury pollution, biodiversity, and we're able to establish connections with parts of the of 21 out of 23 targets in this global framework. And we are embarking on very fruitful, I hope there will be, but collaboration with different organizations to also advance the work on biodiversity, specifically in relation to the effects of mercury. And there's another document that's still not in a formatted form, but we hope to do so soon, which is about mercury monitoring in and around artisanal and small-scale gold mining sites. It's primarily based on the experience in the Peruvian region of Madre de Dios. Eva will know more because she's also working on trying to take lessons learned from the Arctic and transfer them to the Amazon, which are much needed, especially in the sense of engagement and partnerships with the indigenous peoples As you know, the Amazon has hundreds of indigenous peoples, different indigenous peoples across the 9 Amazonian countries. So this is part of the work that we are also doing. And with that, I think I finished our presentation.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Manoela, and also Eisaku. And as we mentioned at the beginning, AMAP is really strongly committed to supporting the development and future implementation of the Minamata Convention. And in that context, it's not just useful, it's really important that the scientific community understands the context that we're working on. And